You sat in West End room, aren't you, Joe?
It's not. It's the Joe Martin suite. I think you'll find it's called now, Stanley.
Is it?
Right. Yeah.
Where we live.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what, Jez, if you got keys to West End room when you were our age, you weren't sitting on a podcast with weren't used for reading and contemplating back in them days, were it, Jez, if you had keys for West End room?
I've actually got keys now, Stanley, so we're
too old now, Jez. We're too old for any of that business.
Joe Martin, if you're in the same room, West End room, when you're with Jez, you could learn a lot, lad. You could learn. You could learn a hell of a lot.
Gordon, send Moorhouse to save the house. Come on, the house!
Not cricket related, but tell these lads about when you smashed your telly in a couple of Christmases ago.
Well, I've been. It was a lonely part of my life, and I'd been in Aiton Lee with waiting yourselves, and I think
Christmas Eve this was.
Yeah, Christmas Eve, and we finished up down in the George IV, and I walked home right as a bobby. Got home about 1 o'clock. Thought I'd ordered a curry as I neared home from K2 because they do a ring stinger. And sat in the house waiting for the curry, put the telly on. I thought, oh, Chris, I'll put Christmas tree lights on. Wanders over to
1 o'clock in the morning.
To put the plug in and tripped over the rug, went head first into the telly, which is a 110-inch job. And the telly was that heavy, it rolled me into the Christmas tree. So I'm led on my back, covered in Christmas tree and TV, and there's a, not on the door, on the window that I'm led under, and it's the curry man. Christ knows what he thought as I turned round, buried in Christmas tree and TV, and said, I'll be with you in a minute. And got extricated myself, got my curry, put it to one side, reassembled the Christmas tree as best I could with this massive kink in the trunk. Put the telly on, but bear in mind 3/4 of it's now shattered. Started eating my curry when Caroline came home. Hey Dad, hi Kaz, had a good night, yeah, blah blah blah. I said, Kaz, I've something to tell you. What's that? I said, I've smashed the telly in the Christmas tree. What? So she accuses me of being absolutely arsehole, which I'm not. So this is how daft it was. So I said, you say, I'm not drunk, Kaz, ask me anything. She said, all right, then give me the lowdown on the 1917 Russian Revolution. So I knocked it off in about 10 minutes, and she retired to bed, content that I wasn't pissed. Albeit we had a smashed telly and Christmas tree. Merry Christmas.
We saw this. We saw an end to the doldrums. I don't know what you thought, Gary. You chose to join Lancashire League cricket, decided that you were going to become a captain and you were going to get runs in Lancashire League, which you did because your ability always were going to let you do that. It was just weird watching things change, like you, Stanley. I always remember people saying to you, well, those people aren't that good at playing. Then I thought to myself, Paul Stanley's got 5 wickets in first team 6 times. Shut up.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, lads? I'm not being weird or anything like that. Like Stan and Phil and Tripp getting 500 runs and things like that. Moinder Amanath and pros like that. People started realising that the club weren't just about Burnley Cricket Club. Who good luck to them. Our club has just done fab. And it now sits where it sits because of the hard work, not of mine, but the hard work of other people.
It's everyone. It's everyone.
That have put the club in what a wonderful position where young people can do what your dad, Jeff Hope, wanted people to do. come to Lowerhouse, play every day. Stan Eaton said, you turn up at my cricket club, you're going to get a bat, a ball and a field, no matter how good, bad, rubbish, autistic, useless, can't play, do anything, you're going to get a go. Crack on.
Well, that summarised Matt Stansfield up.
Oh, wait till that. Just on that, Jez, I often think as well that I often think that some of the stuff that's said about those teams of the 90s is really harsh.
Yeah,
they weren't bad teams.
No,
they were just teams that got on bad runs. Teams that perhaps didn't have the right pro. There were some excellent cricketers in those teams, and I think that sometimes they get a little bit of. I can't comment on the 60s and what have you, because obviously I wasn't there, but I do think those 90s lads sometimes get a little bit of an harsh rap when it comes to people
95
reminiscing
to
about
2000 were really good teams. Really good teams. Yeah. Well, just going, when Gary were talking, when Gary was talking, it sticks in my mind is we were very close. We were very close as a team, and when we started winning, and we must have been horrible to play against because we were that close and we were winning games as well, and it must have been horrible to play against at that point. I don't think we'd ever had that. But Rusty got it going a bit in seconds when I played. We used to win a lot more than we lost, but. When you're close knit and you're winning, you must be hard to play against. Must be horrible to play against. Actually, we just didn't. You look at the pros we had to play against, and we had great pros, but to compete against Alan Donald and Roger Harper and Joe Scuderi. These guys were getting $12,000 in 1995.
Sleep and
what were Cameron paid, Jez, when Cameron went pro?
I've no idea. We just didn't get involved.
Sean Flegler told us in his podcast he got £3,200. I could have paid him that. I didn't realise he was getting that little.
You say about the pros with the money thing and what have you. We've had many discussions at committee meetings about pros. Everyone's after Darren Smith, aren't they? And there's not many of them about. There weren't many Roger Harpers. There weren't many Peter Sleeps, were there back then? Those players are sort of come along and they earn the top brass. But as a club, when we were on our uppers in 2011, we're literally scratching the barrel, having chased big pros and big names. We end up with Frankie, and what a bloody that was. We had $6,000 to spend on a pro.
Yeah.
So probably the cheapest pro we'd had in 20 years. He turns into an absolute superstar.
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it?
David Wren said to me and Charlie at that point, "So we're going to do it this year." So I'm going to. Because he felt a bit burnt by Aaron Hill, did David, when we had a meeting with him. And it was a great guy we're having. And David felt a bit burnt by it. It hadn't worked out and people were questioning right ground. I mean, he was bowling waist out full tosses and all sorts, and he was really struggling. But he's pro, so you persevere. David Wren said to me, Charlie, so we're going to do it a bit different this year. So I'm going to give you four names, and then you come back to me. You think you want out of them 4 names, and I'll go and get him for you. And actually, the guy we signed last year were one of the names. We'd have been a lot younger then, Orbis. And we picked Frankie basically because we sat down, me and Charlie, looked at games and worked out that we were losing by 15 and 20 runs, and pro were going for 4.5 and over. So if we could get the pro down to 3.5, 3 and over. So we said to David, go and get him because he bats at number 8, which we thought, well, that's number 3, number 4 in Lancashire League. And we went and got Frankie for £6,000, and it was a great decision, and it, we sort of felt a bit honoured because David had let us in, and he went away on his own, did David, didn't he? And he got some fantastic pros. But he felt. I can remember him saying to me, Charlie, he was in the club room the day he told Aaron he weren't re-signing him, and he said he got me and Charlie over. Said I want to do it a bit different this time. And I felt a bit honoured that David had put that trust in us, and then we went and picked Frankie. Look, we never thought when we picked Frankie, we knew we'd be better. We never thought it'd lead to what it led to. We just thought, if we can get back to top 4 again, like we were in the 90s, and then all of a sudden we're doing doubles and unbelievable times, and like Joe played in it there, Joe Martin and all that, and Joe Beneducci. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
And the good thing about that, Johnny Russell were about, like I say, Johnny Russell, Joe, Charlie. It was good, Blaze. So there was still that core there who'd worked the bar,
Good.
Double for us.
What's your thoughts on that, the pros?
Bit boring, really, Shez, but everything that's been said. I mean, obviously, once I finished playing, we was sort of less in that involved in those sort of discussions about who we ended up and we've said it on podcast, but it's worth putting into the mix here. We've talked about players, we've talked about the old boys, kept the club upright, and we've talked about pros and stuff like this. But when, I'd obviously pissed Stan off so much that he decided, I think we picked up on it the other day, Joe found some old cricket scorecards that had open batting and bowling in seconds once. And I think that put Stan over edge. And he went on his mission to sort of a junior section out after that. And that's it. If that's what we've come to, then enough. But no, in all seriousness, I think that timing of all those seedlings that Stan had sown coming through to start playing thirds and second team cricket, just then from sort of mid-2000s onwards, it was just, it'd have been amazing if it didn't come off, if we didn't start producing results, because all foundations were there by that point. It was brilliant.
I can remember Ted getting 50 in first team at Burnley and Nicky having to make a massive decision and leave him out. And, those decisions, Joe Beneducci, were ridiculous at that time. And you saw the way that Nicky were thinking, I need a more dynamic cricket team. We need to be more dynamic. We need to, and they were tough calls. You know what I mean? And we're all friends, aren't we? And you're leaving players out and in first team level and stuff like that, which were tough choices. Beneducci, when you won the league,
yes.
When it got to the bit where you were going to win the league with your pro, when did you think this is ours?
We beat Ramsbottom in about early August. It was us and them at the top of the league, and we went to Ramsbottom and smashed them at Ramsbottom. And that put us, I don't know, maybe 15, 18 points clear. So there was still a month of the season to go. But by that stage, we just beat our closest rivals, and we kind of felt at that stage we were onto something. Obviously, we still have a lot of work to do, but that was really when it started in serious, if you will. We had a couple of games at the back end of that season which we won.
I thought the win at Burnley that year was the one that made me think we're going to win this.
Well, we beat Burnley at home later on in the season in a game that we should never have won, when I think we were something like 5 for 3.
Yeah.
And Tripp and Blaise put 100 on, and we ended up winning that game from nowhere. But yeah, in terms of when it really started to crystallise, it was probably the Rammy game. Johnny Russell got 7 for.
Yes, he certainly did. And what was it about that side that you could point to think, we're going to win the league here, lads? We're going to make history for this club, and we're going to show everybody at last.
It didn't have any of us letting it shed.
Yeah, I weren't playing.
I don't think it was ever a case of we're going to make history and we're going to show everybody. It don't really enter your mind when you're going through it. It's only afterwards when you look back and think, crikey, what have we achieved here? It's like out of this world. But at the time, we were just a good side. We had a lot of very good players. We had obviously a very good professional, and we got on a roll. And once we got on a roll, it was very, very, very difficult to stop us.
I remember speaking to you into the clubhouse after that game, and you, in your normal dignified self, said, if it weren't for you lot, Sheridan, Hope, and all the other people, we'd never achieve this. Do you still stick by that?
Well, definitely. Like has been said already on here, you're a product of your environment, and you can only get to where you've got to by the people who were around earlier on, and they shape you into talking about me, I'm talking about the club and the team as a whole. So I think that goes without saying, and I think that's the case across the piece, and the success we've had later, we all played a part in that as well. I'm convinced of it.
Joe, if I can interject.
Yeah, sure.
You cannot underestimate individual talent. Since, 2004, we haven't had a player that hasn't had a first 11 50. We've had players batting at number 11 that have had first 11 50s. Look at
We've had a player batting at number 11 who's had a first 1100.
Look at Joe Martin, exactly. Fergus Bailey when he played. We've had good sides. Bembo was a terrific player for us.
Yeah.
You know, I could go on itemising them.
Finch.
You cannot underestimate having good players, and the job of the captain these days is simply to assemble them and make the best of them. Back in the day, captains would have had to come up with all sorts of field placings, bowling changes, batting orders, simply to compete. It's changed.
Gary used to have to ring Panama's to make sure we'd left. Get Fran to ring him at 3 in the morning.
Dukes, you've alluded to this in the past.
I was having a sleepover in the boiler then.
But I think, Stan, you're right about the talent thing. I think talent only gets you so far. When you look at the teams from, say, 2006 to 2010, you could argue that some of the squads there were better than the ones that won. You know,
2008 we had a great team on paper.
Yeah,
2008 was a fantastic side, but they finished nowhere.
But you always say it's momentum, isn't it? If a team can get a run of wins together, then we can. I mean, Stanley, how many times have we talked about that 2014 season where we won the league, and we said it was for you, it was one of the most difficult seasons and unenjoyable seasons that you've had to deal with. But we won 19 games in a row.
We won league in 2014 because we had all the best players. We won it in 2011 and 2012 because we had best side. We were a team. Just my opinion on it.
That's a fallow year that you've talked about, Joe. There was a little bit of indiscipline in the team. Weren't always as disciplined as they ought to have been. A lot does rest on team spirit. And of course the captain and the environment that they're playing in. And if it's not right, you'll have years like that, no matter how talented your players are.
Should have drafted Gary in. He'd have sorted them out.
God, Christ almighty.
Invading Poland. We've been invading Poland again in 2008.
Toe the line, or it's British gas for you.
Stan, give us a few examples of Gary's tyranny.
Well, if for instance anybody inquired why they'd been left out, Gary's response was, because I say so. And if you queried that, you got the response, because I say so. For the only time in my career, I rang up one morning and said, Gary, I said, I'm terribly sorry, a couple of things have happened at home. I can't play. Why? Well, I suppose I can only sum it up because I'm not in the right frame of mind. He didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. But I don't hold that against Gary. Gary's a fabulous lad. It was just the way it was, and Gary, there's no disputing it. Gary was a tough captain. Jez was a tough captain. Nicky had tough moments. Matt had tough moments. I'd like to think that on occasions I was a tough captain. Captaining Lowerhouse Cricket Club in this period wasn't easy. When I became, how can we put it? When I started to, get heavily involved in the cricket, Matt was captain, and I didn't want Matt having to ring up on a Saturday morning trying to get a team together. Can't remember who the second team captain was at the time. It might have been Paul. Didn't want Paul ringing up having to get a team together. So I did it, and I'd like to think that took a little bit of the pressure off. But undoubtedly, in some seasons, particularly in the second 11, you've heard Keith talk about that, Brian Higgin talk about it. They had to actually get somebody to do the tees. So captain in Lowerhouse Cricket Club was not the bed of roses that it was when Joe Beneducci had to do it.
There were no fanning about. Once you got left out, you got left out. And I once went at Lane Ends with Proc, and they were burning the Express up bar, and he found out Gary had left him out. I think it Burnley Express up on bar. And I said I'd ring him if I were you. And like Stan says, I'm not ringing him. After 40 seconds.
I'll tell you what, Douche, that was a great question there of Stan, and Stan's answered it, exactly as I remember it. But if I just give you my take on it, then I think it's fair to ask Gary, see what he thinks.
Ask Gary,
about
yeah, definitely, yeah.
So I'll give you my take on how it went from the, let's call it Lofty's era, and before that was even more difficult. Then it developed and it came through, and I'd like to think into my era, and we all overlapped in bits of this. And David Wren was instrumental in, I want this club to succeed on the field. He was a big friend of Ken Smalley's, was gently taking over from Ken, but he wanted us to succeed on the field. And he certainly, he made that clear. He had a few outbursted runners in the dressing room. He really was a tough, we're not here just to make the numbers up. So that started... I look back at it now, and he would just start chipping away at you, talking about the amateurs, or it wouldn't interfere with who should be in the side, but talking about the pro and should we do this, should we do that, and all the season he would get to you. And so I got a little bit from my football, got a bit tough with it. We need to do this a bit differently, and Gary's probably in the wings there. So then when Gary takes over, and I'll never forget Gary, he was real serious. I remember, he can comment on this in a minute. He was reading books about captaincy. He was, quoting these, good captains in the history of cricket. So then Gary, and I think it was the circumstances, came into to be the figurehead, and I'm not bullshitting, I'd be pecking his head, saying, you need to bollocks down. He's pissing about again. He's fucking about. Get him told. Renners would be at the other side of him. We need to get this sorted. Phil Astin's just not, he's playing for himself, or he's not contributing to this. So Gary was the figurehead who really carried all the bullets for the other people in and around. And Stan agreed with everything that was going on. I know he used to get a lot of grief, but Stan agreed with it in the long run. What do you think, Gary? What was it like then? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think there's elements of truth in all that. The first year we had going over the old podcast, but the first year we took, he was sort of taking over from you, were one thing, and then there was still a good mix of the Iggies, Phil Astins, etc. In that team. So and like Stan said a few times, we lost sort of 13, 14 on the bounce, so nothing were going particularly well. I think, but from then onwards, not wanting, because the thing I didn't want anything to do, because just not having that history of that a lot of you guys that have been down there 10, 15 years, was just coming in and being, everything getting fractured. So if it was somebody, if you were listening to you guys, you were listening to Dave Wren or whatever, and that one person being able to take the flak or be that point of hire for somebody, and that was fine. But I think it just all needed pulling together and not letting it down. Before, it wasn't a style that you'd sort of manufacture or say that's a great way of doing things. It was just what I thought we needed at the time. But yeah, getting pulled.
Gary, I have a question.
Gary used to have a laugh at work and be pissed off at cricket.
Gary,
go on, Matt Stanner.
Those books you read about captaincy, did Stan feature in any of them?
I do remember, Gary. That,
Stan did a DVD, 101 Great Leg Buys.
I do remember, Gary, that time after you'd read that book on captaincy and speech making, when we were playing Blackpool in a pre-season friendly, and you said we were going to fight them on the beaches. I do remember that.
I think there's a lot made out about that, but we had some great times, and
yeah, we did. Yeah,
there were times where Jez and Stan touch on it with Matt and Nicky and stuff like that. You had to put your arms around people and do the softer side of it and stuff, but it would just all that gets lost, Stanley. All those times where you pick people up by the bootstraps because they're times, and take them for a pint and make them feel warm and comfortable. All that's long forgotten.
You took me plenty of times, Gary.
Can I just throw in at this juncture, without resorting to Sheridan-esque
stay away from that, Stan.
Sentimentality. Obviously, I'm the oldest here. So, looking at it from my 62 years of age, I'm looking at people currently. Matt Stanley and Paul Stanley, grandson of Jack. That's 50 years of linkage at Lowerhouse Cricket Club. Jez, Nicky, Matt, with Jeff, similar, Gary and Brian. This is what this club's about, and somehow, Joe Beneducci, you've got to fit into that. But
you know, well, I was just going to say that. I was just going to say you were saying that that's what the club's about, but it's also that you can just come in as somebody who's got no prior links, and it doesn't hamper you in any way, shape, or form. I've captained the first team, and my dad never even played cricket. Yeah. Charlie came and joined the club as a 15-year-old. He's ended up captaining the first team. So you're right. It's great to have that lineage, but it's an open door. You can come in.
Yeah, it's not
essential.
Well,
Joe, you're absolutely right, and I think it's a credit to the club that happens. I think it's a credit to you chaps that you carry on with us without that history. You've even bloody moved down to Lowerhouse, and of course, house prices have dropped subsequently. But but the fact, and Joe, you know, you're the first captain to have won the Lancashire League for Lowerhouse Cricket Club. My God, I'd have a cock the size of the Eiffel Tower if somebody said that of me. I'd have to be prepared to lose a few inches, but there we go.
Do you know when Jez said
the first morning that Joe moved in, Blaise walked out front of his door and he said to Joe was stood there. He said, "It's right, Blaise, what's going down?" And Blaise said, "Price of my house. Now you've moved in."
Thank you to our 3 sponsors for supporting our podcast. John Russell's Art Caterers and Milltown Pies, who offer fantastic catering services, Alexander Grace Law, who provide modern and client-led legal services, and SBE Furnishings, who offer high-quality furnishings and electrical items at fantastic prices.
Do you know when Jez was saying about doing things more organised and getting things better and more professional, and David Wren wanted to do this and that? Can you remember? We used to have a selection meeting on Tuesday nights. Pint team up on notice board, then locked door to club, so you couldn't go and see teams. And they genuinely did that, didn't they? Pick teams and locked door, so no one. Yeah. You still didn't know till Friday until you picked paper up, and no one bothered. It was just the way, weren't it?
Yeah.
You know, you'd say that to a kid now. Well, I want to know what I'm doing on Saturday. You know, I need to know on Monday what they're doing on Saturday. You know, you just put up with it, didn't you?
Well, that's a sign of the changing times, Paul, because they had nothing else to do on a Saturday. You know, they were playing cricket unless told otherwise. But just going back to selection meetings, the season Steve G packed in and I took over, the first meeting, we picked the side, and somebody said, we've had a few complaints about how we put the team up. So somebody said, well, batting order. Well, how do we know that? Captain's going to pick the batting order. Well, let's put it in alphabetical order. And somebody said, well, we've got 8 people in the team beginning with H. So somebody said, well, why don't we go H-A, H-E? and it was as rudimentary as that.
Yeah.
You know, light years, but fabulous people, honestly.
Yeah. Stan, so is it you took over in the middle of the season from Steve G?
Yes.
What were the circumstances of that?
I think Steve felt very, very let down by the committee. He'd taken over from Peter Wade.
All right.
Who was a lovely, lovely guy. If there was ever a captain that you wanted to bring teams and players together, it was Peter.
Yeah.
Sadly, he was criticised for his playing contribution, which was a bit unfair. But as a human being, he was magnificent.
Yeah.
And of course, he came back to coach later on, and he's passed on since. If I remember it right, Steve took over from Peter. Steve packed in mid-season because I think he was exasperated by what he saw as a lack of support by the committee, and I was the vice captain.
Right.
I think it was only 20. Might have been 17, something stupid. I was really young. Might have been 21. And I took over and captained for a couple of years, and then it must have been 1980 because I joined the police, and being captain was very, very difficult, and the decision was taken out of my hands. And I can still remember Jack Hayes sitting in my house, at my mum's house today, sacking me.
Really?
Yeah, and you know, Jez, it was probably the right decision. But I'd had a shocking year with the bat. I think I'd won 50. We'd finished 10th. Curtie was the pro. He got 500 runs and I think 40 wickets. The top run scorer was Blaise with 350 runs. The top wicket taker was Roger with 30 wickets. And I actually thought that to finish 10th was not a bad result with figures like that.
Yeah,
but it wasn't right, Jez. I was turning up we used to kick off at 2:00 in those days. I'd work early, so I'd turn up at 1:45. It wasn't right.
Yeah, no, it's difficult. It's just when you think of the chairman and soon to be president of the club to walk into your house on Lowerhouse Lane to Stan, can I come in for a brew? Yeah, I can just picture it because he was subtle.
I knew what it was. Stan, can I come round and sack you? Yeah, of course you can.
And Jack would say it like that. Jack Hayes would definitely say it like that.
Well, to be fair, he was as diplomatic as he could be, and all I could say to him, Jack, you're right. I think under normal circumstances I deserve, because the year before we'd finished 4th.
Yeah.
I think when I was captain, and you see the other thing that tempted him was Lofty had announced that he would be prepared to be captain again, because Lofty didn't like Curtie. He couldn't work with him. I could, and Lofty decided he wanted to be captain again, and it was very tempting because in '82 we'd finished 2nd with Lofty as captain. In '83, did I say I took over from Steve G? No, I didn't. I took over from Lofty. What a load of bollocks.
Can we record this bit?
No, I did take over from Steve G temporarily. Anyway, there we are. Sorry, Joe. When you get to my age, you might have a few memory failures. You fucking twat.
So Lofty takes over from then, I suppose. Yeah.
Lofty took. We had an interview process, and I think Lofty took over, and then the following year we had another interview process, and I think Tripp took over.
Right. Yeah, probably. I mean, that would have been Delroy's year, I think.
Yeah, quite possibly. No, Delroy was 1990. That might have been a bit soon. I don't know. But it is difficult. Thank God for Nigel Stockley's website. You can dive on that, can't you?
Yeah, definitely.
And firm things up. I've told a couple of tales ad infinitum and gone on Stockley's website and thought, Christ, I've got that wrong.
Yeah.
Joe, have you had your Christmas card yet? Joe,
when you said that Walsden had signed.
Well, early morning, bleary-eyed, no glasses on. I went on Facebook and I could see that a former professional cricketer had signed for Walsden, and put this on the committee WhatsApp, and it was discussed, and then Ben Heap about an hour later spotted that he'd actually signed for Walkden. I did apologise for and I can tell you now, those of you that don't wear glasses, short-sightedness is a curse. I can still see 2 ants crawling up Pendle Hill from Lowerhouse Cricket Club, but I can't read what's in front of my nose.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant.
It might be time for the books, Jez.
We lost Park, eh?
Yeah, Park is gone.
I sent him a message.
Yeah, no reply.
Before we go on to the books, I don't know if anyone's considered this when it was on Twitter about Mr. Drabble's goal watch. I know you won't know the answer to this, Stan, but I just wonder, I wonder who paid for that.
Well, I imagine the committee, but is that the club? Is that not just typical of Lowerhouse Cricket Club? You present somebody with a goal watch, he gets pissed, drops it out of his pocket, and the car runs over it. Fabulous.
Yeah, I know.
Fabulous.
I know. Yeah.
You know what it is, Jez, with that? I think it's all relative, that. I think that back in the day, we were skint, but only in comparison to other clubs. So when people say we were skint, it's because everyone else was more well. I do. I think it's all relative.
Really?
I do, yeah. And a goal watch.
Guys, Joe Drabble's, let me have a think, cousin would have been Peter Wade.
Yeah.
Peter Wade's dad had saved every end-of-season report and balance sheet from 1872, 10 years after we were founded, to about 1960, and he let me have them. And I read them and made notes, and I've never published them, which is stupid of me. And one day when I've got time, I will do. They're currently in Burnley Library, and Anne Cochrane's gone through them as well, and she puts things up. We were always strapped for money. And you know the park wall, there was a fence there originally, and it went right up to Liverpool Road, and they paid £3,000 in the 1940s for a wall and fence to be built there. And it kept them in stuck for donkey's years. Some of it's astonishing. Some of it brings tears to your eyes. There's one where, obviously, cricket's suspended during the First World War. And Lowerhouse's greatest cricketer at the time, whose name escapes me, was reported missing in action. And there's I think it was called Wilkinson, if it pops back in my mind. There's quite a long spiel on that, and it's incredibly moving. And when they suspend the Lancashire League in the Second World War, there are friendly games arranged, like Stanley Matthews.
You were going to say up then, Stan.
Stanley, for argument's sake, in football, Stanley Matthews played for Aldershot because he was posted there during the war. They had friendlies, and I'll never forget, I hope, the phrase used by the chairman at the time, who said, "The Lancashire League has been suspended because some of our players have gone to fight a greater fight than cricket." And you think, Christ Almighty! And I think at the end of the First World War, it was something like 19 Lowerhouse Cricket Club members and players were never heard of again.
Yeah.
Lost in action.
Can't believe it. No, it's
You can't.
No.
And not to get political, I look at all the criticism that flies about these days. Winston Churchill, with our current press and social media, would not have stood a chance.
No.
I think we lost about 19 on Matt Stagg doing Newcastle. Never to be seen of again.
Yeah. That was a trip.
We've got
the brilliant thing about that is someone actually, and it's not anyone who's directly related to the cricket club, but someone actually came home with a child from that trip, didn't they?
And a wife.
The wife. It's fantastic.
Well, they can't. Matt Stagg do were in Spain, so whose do was it?
It might have been his 30th or something like that. Yeah.
It was my 40th.
Yes, it was. It was your 40th.
We went to
when Stan drove bus.
Yeah, we went horse racing, and it was called off. Listen, Joe, I don't know if we've told this before.
No.
So it was a long time ago, obviously my 40th, and we were all arranged, all excited. I think we were going for 2 nights, and we'd arrange a minibus. Stan was really quite instrumental with Nicky, I think, in sorting different surprises out and everything. And the idea was we were going to meet at Ganna Roundabout at what were the pub called up there, which is knocked down now?
Derby.
Yeah, we're going to meet at the Derby, leave some cars there, and go over in this minibus that we'd arranged. So we all turn up. Stan, bless him, turns up dressed as like a driver, proper driver. He's got his flat hat on. He's got his driving jacket on, and we get and say it's a 14-seater. There's 15 of us, so we decide that someone needs to go. Just take one of the cars with all the bags in to save room in there. So your Uncle Shez drove up on his own.
Who paid his petrol?
I can't. Well, he might have been someone else's car, but no one would get in with him. And we got up, and the horse racing was called off because of ice, because of frost. And it went downhill from there. 3 days of absolute.
It went downhill a lot earlier than that. You had Stella and champagne on bus on Wales.
Yeah, on bus on Wales. Yeah.
How many nights on top did your room get emptied by Gav? I think it was, or somebody.
Yeah, me, Gav.
I actually drove up in an American police lieutenant's cap, as well as my blazer.
Stan, do you want to tell some stories from your books?
Very quickly, because I've read these so many times, sometimes you can't tell the funny from the unfunny. But here we are. If I need to tell the original tale for this, I will do. Versus East Lancs, Jez Hope, celebrating the 2nd anniversary of having driven Norman Dale out of town. And Jez was injured at this point. He took on the role of first 11 scorer. Who can forget that immortal moment and phrase when Jez said to Norman, after Norman Dale had said to him, if you can do fucking better, you do it. Jez said, Norman, this town ain't big enough for the both of us. And we never saw Norman the scorer again.
Stan, can you remember what was my injury?
Was it your nose? Was that a separate one?
I did my
neck,
broken neck.
Broken
yeah,
neck.
Playing football.
Neck, yeah.
Soft bastard.
In fact, talking
again, we a broken neck, you soft bastard.
Finished game of football.
Talking about your nose. Remember this one? We had a place photo taken. I think I've still got it. Again, Jez Hope. Players attending the meeting were very complimentary. The photographs now adorning the walls of the club's Excelsior room. The only blemish, however, was the photograph of Jez Hope, where he had long hair and a nose so misshapen that someone thought that he had strapped Brian Holmes Hampton to his face. Bloody hell, Jez, you're never right. Jez Hope. Jez has a real do at Brian Holmes. Holmesy accuses the bowlers of losing the game against Cole. And Jez goes absolutely bloody mad, throws Holmesy's kit all over the dressing room floor when he goes to the toilet. When they go out to bat, Jez runs Brian Holmes out. The game deteriorates and it looks like we're going to be fighting with Cole. So bearing in mind, Jez and Holmes, you've had this massive fucking blow up. At the end of the game, when we thought we were going to be fighting, Jez soon changed his tune and said to Brian, please can I go to the bar with you? Because he was a hard lad.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
Great predictions, Jez Hope. After Brian Terry had blocked 3 balls with the score at 76 for 6, Jez turned to me and said, I hope we haven't got this for the next 23 overs. The next ball, Brian Terry trip out of the ground for 6. Iggy, this is the first game of the season. Get talking about football, and Iggy says that he hadn't kicked a ball for 16 years. To which Jez commented, that's not true, Iggy. You kicked loads when you kept wicket to Curtie Azab. I'm going to save that one. There's a few for Shez here. He will. What a bloody off week. Shez took over Andy McNicholas's team clown, and he got fined every week. Did Shez? 1 week he doesn't get fined, so he says, "Can I have a refund? Because I've not got fined." So he didn't get rid of meeting. He didn't get a refund, and he got fined 50p for failing to live up to expectations. This is a belter. This is the final one, and I think it's a good one to finish on. Jez and Roger Bromley and families go on holiday to Filey. And we get daily postcards from Jez. Friday, arrived safely. Tricia drove all the way here from the back seat. Saturday, went for a drink. went for a drink and took the locals on at Domino's. All went well until Roger had to retire with knocker's knuckle. Sunday, went to the beach. Kids had a great time on the sand. Adam buried Dean. Dean's Roger's son. That's Sunday. Monday, found where Adam had buried Dean. The girls got caught in a shower of rain, but we were all right as it doesn't rain in the tap room. Tuesday, tragedy on the beach. Adam drowned a donkey. Stephen and Dean played at being Leeds fans in the Ornamental Gardens. Wednesday, beach cricket. Me and Roger versus the wives and kids. Roger not speaking to Leslie because she kept hitting him into the sea. Adam went to get the ball from the sea. In view of what happened to the donkey, nobody went to help him. Thursday, after much deliberation, I go nude sunbathing. It didn't go down well on the hotel patio. Friday, last day, as a special treat, we took the kids to see Punch and Judy. Unfortunately, we were asked to leave when during a fight scene, I shouted out, "Kick him in the bollocks." And that was a postcard from Jez from Filey.
We did go away, actually, the two families. And we came back to play cricket, me and Roger, and left them over there at Filey. At Pontins or Butlins, whichever it was.
Is Paul Stanley still with us?
Yeah.
I love Keith to bits. I mean, he's probably the most unsung hero in terms of volunteer hours at the club you've ever seen.
100%. Yeah, he's fantastic.
Barbara keeps saying to him, by the way, there's a story about that. I can tell you that one in a minute. Barbara keeps saying to him, "They're always taking the piss out of you." And Keith keeps coming to me and saying, "You're always taking..." I said, "Tell Barbara, we only take the piss out of you, Keith, because we love you." I said, if we didn't like you, we won't take the piss out of you. Me, Deb, Barbara and Keith have gone on holiday to Lanzarote. And you know, you do what you do during the day and you have an evening meal. And we finish up at this bar and they have a quiz. It's fabulous. Fabulous quiz. They have shout-out rounds where you get a schnapps if you shout the answer out. And the rest of it's written down, photo round, all that business, all light-hearted. And Keith and Barbara, the only question Keith has ever answered in the probably 14 quizzes we've been in is, "Do you want another gin?" He's absolutely fucking useless. But we have a great time. And he is funny. And I'll tell you, Keith's no soft touch, you know. He comes across as cuddly Keith. He has some really strident views. But and in these books, Christ almighty, he's mentioned endlessly. Endlessly. Played in one game at Ramsbottom, and you know when the ball follows you, and big ground ram it, and Keith's not the quickest across the ground. And Lofty must have moved him so many times. I remember when Lofty moved him for about the 5th time, Iggy shouted out, "Get him a Red Rose Rambler," which was a local bus ticket at the time. And we all started feeling a bit self-conscious about this. You know, bloody hell, he's moved him again. Christ, they've got 2 to him again. They've got 3 to him this time. He stopped at 4, but they've run 5. All of that business. And he come in, and Keith were absolutely bloody ripping. And even Lofty was no soft. Even Lofty, I could see him thinking, you know, what do I say? And so eventually Lofty, what's wrong, Keith? And Keith launches into this diatribe about how he's been moved around the field and made to look stupid. And he says, "I've never been so humiliated in my life." Cue Hickey, man for a crisis. "Well, Keith," he says, "you need to get out more."
Oh, dear.
It weren't soft. Going on back onto Rusty, it weren't soft one, but Rusty used to tear into me when I was younger. All of us, like me, Simon, Ryan, Brock, Matt, used to proper tear into us. So some real fallout for him.
Do you remember when he got banned for abusing the umpire?
Yeah, our bowler. Iggy told that story. Yeah, our bowler.
It's hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah,
like being savaged by a dead sheep. It's hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah. I bowled it with Peter Thompson because Ushers had fallen out at Bacup for having to play in seconds. Iggy's right. I bowled at him and it weren't a great delivery, but he like went to guard it into third man and just proper lobbed it up to Iggy, like proper lob. And he caught it. And Peter Thompson were adamant that, he knew he'd hit it, but and Bob Brooks had said all right, but he was adamant that we'd rogued Andrew Spencer out. Do you know Andrew Spencer?
Yeah.
Peter Thompson was adamant we'd rogued him out. We got him out caught behind. Procker got him out caught behind, and he hadn't hit it. So as far as he was concerned, we're level. But I don't know if it was. I think Scotty were playing it, either Shez or Scotty. And Andrew Spencer was only a young kid at the time, and Scotty said something like, "Well, you fuck off and send him back." You know, Peter Thompson. But yeah, it got nasty, did that? And he's right, he had to grab hold of Rusty. It got really nasty. It were personal with that. I mean, Rusty, another one with Rusty, we had played at Rishton. And he had a thing with Rusty, I don't know if Gary can remember it, but when Gary first come to the club, really, and if someone new turned up, Rusty would like fuck one at regulars off and put one at new one at open batting or open bowling, and you've been bowling for Rusty for 3 years. But he'd just fuck you off. And we didn't have nets or anything. So someone would turn up and he'd bowl. And this one particular time, I was bowling at Rishton. And can you remember him who Rishton signed, that Russell Davis?
Yeah.
And he captained him to the league title, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when he came from Wales and he didn't qualify to play at first team. So he had to play at second team. But I think he played like Glamorgan seconds or something. It was serious cricketer, this fella. And I were bowling at him. One of these, I were getting close, but he was playing some good shots. And then with 5 overs left, Rusty says to me, "I'm taking you off." He said, I'm going to give Stuart Taylor a go. I said, "Rusty, it's risky." I said, "He's a good player, him." I said, "It's risky, this." And he were on 68 with Russell Davis, or late 60s. And I said, "It's risky, this." So he takes me off and puts Stuart Taylor on. Russell Davis hits first ball for 2. Then next 2 for 6. And Rusty says to me, "That's your fault, that." I said, "Why is it my fault?" He said, "You've been bowling at him all afternoon. You should have told me we were going to hit him there. He said, I said, "Rusty," and he put a guy there, we had a guy playing called Chris Stevens, who were only a shortish guy. He put Chris Stevens on. Ben, we're only about 5'5", Chris Stevens. He said, "If you'd have told me..." He said, "If you told me we're going to hit him there," he said, "I'd have put Proc down there." I said, "What would you put him down there with, Rusty? A fucking trampoline?" I said, "He's hitting him out at ground." Payne started laughing, but Rusty lost it with me and Payne, completely lost it. He said, "You're not batting, and you're never going to bowl again this season." Russell Davis said, next 3 balls for 6, so he went from 68 to 100 in 1 over. Hit 32 off Stuart Taylor, and Rusty says, "Stanley, finish off from that end." So we're banned from bowling for the season for 3 balls, and we're chasing about 240. He said, "Penny, you better open." He'd just lose it. He'd go bright red and lose it, and then be all right in like 20 seconds.
You said then, Paul, about oohing and ahhing. It reminds me one of Grandad's great sayings that we'd be sat in car at an away ground and someone would be beating bat and what have you, and they'd be ooh ah, and Grandad always used to turn around and say, "Well, Matthew, there's a lot of oohing and a lot of ahhing, but not very many bloody wickets falling out there." Absolute belting saying it.
What about when Matt farted at AGM that night in corridor at toilet, and it just echoed throughout the entire club room?
How did that resonate? Honestly, well, like the start of the 21 gun salute, wasn't it? It was incredible. And it was a it was that really heated meeting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Can you remember when you set Till off, Stan, and ducked?
Yeah.
Old Till. That was funny. It started running receipt through.
Well, Em Bailey was stood next to me, and he's Mr. Chairman. I nearly fucking shit myself. It was an opera singer. Keith and Kevin Bailey's dad, was an opera singer, and he shouted that loud, I shit myself, and somebody dropped the pint next to me. What a meeting that was. That was the Corriordan meeting, that wasn't it?
Yeah.
You won't sit with us that night, Stan.
No, I was. I thought I ought to take it. I remember somebody saying I thought I ought to take a neutral stance. Because I thought, well, Jez is going to speak on behalf of the antis. That a lot of the membership were pro, and that was it a bit in between. I've said this on record before. That was a year where I felt a bit detached largely through work, and a lot of the like Chippy. I couldn't relate to Chippy at all, and people like Chippy, Ryan, what have you. They were a lot younger than me, and it was difficult. And I thought I'd taken a middle ground. And I remember saying, I think at the time we were something like fourth in the table. And I said, look, Mr. Chair, I said, there's a large number of people don't want him. The members obviously do, the players don't. I said, we're fourth in the table. I said, if we finish seventh at the end of the season, nobody will want him. If we win the league, maybe those that don't want him will have to say, we'll have him again. So now we've said to him, hang on, there's an issue. Why don't we wait and see to the end of the season? So I took a sort of middle ground. But I think if I remember rightly, there were 130 at that meeting. We usually get about 70 to an AGM. 130, there were people there that I recognised off the members list. Never seen them.
I mentioned then Craig Parkinson. He was head teacher at Ivy Bank eventually. But when me and Gav had been about 18, we're going now on Friday night, and Gav says, need some cash. We take me to the cash machine. And back then, the only cash machines were in town centre. So I drives into town centre. You know where Palazzo is now? And there was an NatWest cash machine there, weren't there? Gav gets out, and there's a fella stood there. And Gav thinks it's Craig Parkinson, head teacher at Ivy Bank. So he says, all right, sir. So this fella turns around and says, yeah, all right. Gav says to him, hey, what's with shit tash? The fella says, sorry. He said, what's with shit tash? and he says, I'm sorry, what you say? Gav says, well, you never had that tash when we were at school? The fella says, I think you're talking about my twin brother, Craig.
Order! Send Moorhouse to save the house!